Hello, this is My Sweet Mess, and welcome to my kitchen, where every week I make a mess trying new recipes in the pursuit of something sweet. This week, I'm excited to try a new-to-me recipe for strawberry scones from Molly at Molly's Home Guide, and I'll leave a link to the original recipe in the show notes below. These bakery-style scones look like the perfect brunch treat. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and let's jump right into the bake. To begin, we will start with our mise en place. Mise en place is a French term for putting in place or everything in its place. It's the process of preparing your tools and ingredients before you get started cooking. For this recipe, we have 3 elements: the dough, the topping, and the glaze. For the dough, we need flour, sugar, baking powder, salt, butter, strawberries, an egg, heavy cream, and vanilla extract. I went ahead and hulled and chopped the strawberries into about 1/2-inch pieces. I also cut the butter into small cubes, which will help it mix better into the dough later on. I also have here some extra flour that I will use later to sprinkle on my counters when it's time to shape and cut the dough. For the topping, we will need milk and sugar. And finally, for the glaze, we need powdered sugar and milk. I went ahead and sifted the powdered sugar just to remove any bumps and lumps, which should help create a smoother glaze later on. While I finish getting the equipment prepped and ready, I'm actually going to put my cold ingredients back in the fridge. So the butter, the cream, and the milk, they'll all get covered and put back in the fridge until I need them later on. Everything else I'm just going to set to the side while I prep our equipment. To begin, we are going to go ahead and preheat our oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. We also need a few cookie sheets lined with parchment paper, a large bowl, a few small bowls, a whisk, a fork, a spatula, a pastry brush, and a sharp knife. I'm going to use the sharp knife to cut the dough into wedges later on. Now, if you don't want to use a sharp knife, you could also use a pizza cutter or a bench scraper. Now that my equipment is prepped and my ingredients are measured out, let's get started with our bake. First up, we will combine our dry ingredients. So in our large bowl, we will combine the flour, sugar, baking powder, and salt. With all of our dry ingredients in the bowl, we will give that a mix until everything is well combined. Now that our dry ingredients are well whisked together, I will bring back the cubed butter that we had popped back into the fridge from the mise en place stage, and we will add these cold butter cubes to our dry ingredients. Now, using a fork or a pastry cutter, we need to work the butter into the flour mixture until it resembles coarse breadcrumbs with some pea-sized pieces of butter remaining. We want to maintain the integrity of the butter pieces to a certain extent. You see, the butter pieces, as they melt, create steam pockets in your scones that help make them light and fluffy. But I am going to help this along a little bit by using my impeccably clean hands to just sort of mush that butter a little bit to help start breaking it down. So what I'm doing here is just taking our dry ingredients and our butter and sort of mashing them together between my hands with the goal of getting us to that cornmeal texture. Be patient on this step, take your time. It's worth the extra effort. I know it's tedious, but it is worth the extra effort in the end. Or at least I hope it is. Now, I don't know about you, but that looks pretty good to me. It's light and fluffy, and I'm not really seeing any large pieces of butter. It looks like breadcrumbs to me, so I'm gonna call it good and actually stop mixing. I don't want to overwork the dough as it could make some tougher scones. So once I've hit the right consistency, I'm actually going to just stop mixing, and now we can move on to our next step. I've got my spatula here and I am going to slowly fold in our chopped strawberries. As I'm folding the strawberries in, I'm trying to be very careful not to crush them. I want to maintain the integrity of the strawberries so that you get that really nice experience when you're biting into the scone. I don't want to have a bunch of mushy strawberries in my scones. Now that my strawberries are well combined with my dry ingredients and butter, I'm actually going to set this aside for later. Now it's time to mix together our wet ingredients. So taking one of the small bowls we prepped earlier, I'm going to whisk together with a fork the egg, cream, and vanilla extract until just combined. As a reminder, the egg and the cream were in the fridge while we were working on our other steps. All right, and that looks well combined to me. So we have our dry mixture from earlier, and I'm actually going to just pour the wet ingredients into the dry, and then just gently stir everything together with our spatula. What we are looking for here is sort of a shaggy dough that should just hold together. I'm also going to be extra careful not to overmix, because if you overmix a scone, it changes the texture of the scone from something light and flaky and buttery to a tough hockey puck. Now this dough looks like it has just come together to me, so let me get our flour that we prepped earlier and get started rolling out this dough. On my impeccably clean work surface, I'm going to take some of the flour that I set aside earlier during that mise en place stage and lightly flour the countertop here. And then I'm going to take our dough and sort of scoop it out. There we go. So I've got our scone dough here on our impeccably clean work surface with just a smidge of flour on it. And what I'm gonna do is sort of mush it into a circle shape. So unlike with cinnamon roll or bread dough where you're trying to knead and push the dough into different shapes to strengthen the gluten, that is not what we're trying to do here. What we're trying to do here is minimally handle the dough, which helps keep everything tender. So now that it's in a sort of circle shape, I need to get it to be about 3/4 of an inch thick. And I know from the tip of my finger to sort of that first fold or seam in your finger is an inch, which means this is way too tall. All right, so there's that fold in my finger, and you can see we're at a little bit over 3/4 of an inch. I think it's okay though. So I've got my scone dough in a 3/4 inch circle, and now what I need to do is take my sharp knife or a pizza cutter or a bench scraper and cut it into 12 wedges like a pizza. So I've got my 12 wedges cut out. On our previously prepared baking sheet, I'm going to space the scones about 2 inches apart on the pan. I have no idea how I'm going to get this up. This is going to take some finessing and trial and error, so I'll come back once all of my scones are on the pan. So I went a little rogue. Let me catch you up. I know what you're thinking. Where did the 12 scones go? Here's what happened. As I was cutting and spacing out the 12 scones, like I was supposed to, I felt like they were really small, like mini size scones. And that really wasn't what I had in mind when I tackled this recipe. So what I did was I mushed 2 scones together to get me 6. What I would recommend if you're making this recipe, and what I'll do the next time I make this recipe, is make 8. So when we've got our scone dough into that disc shape, I'll cut it into 4s and then 4s again to get me my 8 scones, and I'll leave it there. So make 8 scones, not 12, but I'm at 6. And I think it should be fine. I'm really excited about these. They look nice. There's lots and lots of berries. So now it's time to brush our scones, however many we have, with our topping. So I've got my milk here, and it's been in the refrigerator since the mise en place stage, and my pastry brush. And what I'm going to do is take my pastry brush and the milk and just lightly brush the scones. You're just trying to get a very light layer of milk on the top of each scone, and it's more to give a surface for the sugar to stick to. And now I'm going to sprinkle each scone with a little bit of sugar. This is just granulated sugar. If you have some of the larger crystal sugar, then definitely use that. But this is all that I've got, so that's what I'm gonna use. And sprinkling the scones with sugar is super fun. So if you've got helping hands in the kitchen, this would be a great step to get them involved in the baking process. Now that our scones are ready to go, I'm just gonna pop these into our preheated 400-degree oven for about 15-ish minutes. I'll know that our scones are done once they're nice and golden brown on top. So I'll be back once our scones are out of the oven. And wow, these look great. You can see that I made some changes after I put some of the scones down on the trays, but that's okay. The scones themselves look great despite my last minute pivot there at the end. They have a nice golden brown color to them, and those strawberries look really, really fresh. So what I'm gonna do is actually keep these guys on the pan to cool slightly while I make the glaze. So let me pop these to the side and let's get started making our glaze. I've got my sifted powdered sugar here, and again, we sifted this just to remove any lumps and bumps from the powdered sugar, which should help make sure our glaze is nice and smooth. And to our sifted powdered sugar, I'm just going to add our milk, and this has been in the refrigerator since the mise en place stage, so it's nice and cold. And that looks pretty good to me. I think it was a good idea to use that sifted powdered sugar, and this will pour nice and smoothly on top of our scones. So let me go check on them, and then I'll come right back and we will get to glazing our scones. So what I have here is my scones set on a cooling rack set over a piece of parchment paper. The reason my scones are on a cooling rack is as I was looking at them, the bottoms I noticed started to get a little dark, and I didn't want them to burn or continue cooking, so I pulled them off the cookie sheet and onto the cooling rack. Now the reason they're set over a piece of parchment paper is because it is time to glaze my scones. These guys are warm, but certainly not hot. So what I'm going to do is take a little bit of my glaze and just very carefully drizzle it on top of my scone, just like that. Doesn't that look great? I feel like my glaze is a little bit on the thick side, but I'm okay with that. I think it sets nicely over top of the scone. But if you want a thinner glaze, you can add some milk to your powdered sugar. And my other scones, my other 3 scones, are still resting over there behind me, so I'm gonna save the rest of this glaze for them. And just like that, our scones are done. And don't they look wonderful? They are nice and big and fluffy, and they really do look like they came straight from a bakery. Enough chit chat, let's give this guy a taste. Wow. These are buttery, flaky, they have a little bit of sweetness coming in from the glaze, and a nice surprise punch of strawberry in every single bite. I am so impressed with how quickly and easily this recipe came together. If you've never made scones before, I highly recommend this recipe. It was very easy to follow, and I know we hit some bumps along the way, but I think in the end these turned out absolutely wonderful and were worth every learning opportunity throughout our journey. I am off to find a hot cup of tea to go with these delicious strawberry scones. Thank you so much for being here with me today. And remember, Trying new things is messy, but the end result can be pretty sweet. Have a great rest of your day. Bye now.